Art imitates life. Or is it the other way around? As human beings, creative creatures by nature, we tend to take inspiration from our everyday life in order to plaster our ideas into paper. From paintings to movies to books, we take things that inspire us, that create impactful feelings, and from there, we transform them into art. Love, beauty, joy, crime. The amount of good things that we see displayed through art is just rivaled by its negativity. We all love a good drama, don't we? When we can relate to a good hero, but also, if played our cards right, when we can relate to a good villain. Thing is, what harm can this subtle appeal to crime be? In this documentary, we will be focusing around Narcoseries, audiovisual tales of the Mexican kings of crime, and how their idolization through stories can be causing more harm than good, infecting people with the idea that maybe being a violent drug dealer is more cool than it actually is. If art imitates life, maybe life can also imitate art.
As we have seen, people are moved by things that are unknown to them and find a certain appeal to the weak and violent. In this unexplained controversy, we find Narcoseries, shows that provide the audience with extreme violent content. In Mexico, this sparks a wider problem as violence is constantly increasing and it is related to this type of media. A study meant to find out which 10 images represent Mexico to the world found that Frida Kahlo, Tacos, and Narcos were all about Mexico. And what is the meaning of this? You see, Mexico has gotten itself into its own troubles. Just to give an example, from Mexico, a governmental escrow designated about 17 million Mexican pesos just to finance narco-related content to be published on media streaming services. Imagine what could you do with that kind of money? As we can see, narco is both another problem in Mexico and a very lucrative business. The Mexican government has made some attempts to put an end to this violence. In 2017, before the current administration came, they blamed El Señor de los Cielos, one of the most popular Mexican narco-series of the violence lived in Mexico. Nowadays, Mexican people admire Narcos, from the way they look to the music they hear. Narcos have now become a fashion statement. Violence in Mexican society is attributed to two cases: fiction-based programs, Narcoseries, and the news. Let me clarify this for you. The first ones are used as an argument, as the basis for all the action scenes, while the second one is more of an emblem for the editorial. So basically, the overflow of violent content in both cases has led to the banalization and naturalization of it. If we analyze this, we can actually affirm that if the streaming of extreme violence shows an increase in the rating for the channel, then the channel will make sure to make its audience happy. As you've seen this, we can conclude that violence content promotes violent acts, and while there are plenty of different arguments concerning the problem, one thing is clear: people tend to idolize violence while they attempt to replicate it. A study made by the University of Colima analyzed TV watching studies of 28 young people. The result, based on their media consumption of violent crime, was that 2 of them complete normalize violence and negative acts. Another problem is presently mainly amongst the youth is the growing tendency to follow the violent acts they see on social media. Want some proof? In 2017, Guillermo Barca made an interview with 38 students about who did they follow on social networks. The majority follow people who have an affinity to post violent content or that were involved in criminal life. Narco content in Mexico is more prevalent than ever. It is consumed by viewers of all ages and of all classes. The growing amount of youth watching narco-series corresponds to the huge percentage of crimes committed by teenagers. The exposure of narco-series to young people has changed the way they see narcos, causing some to admire these criminals.
Therefore, in order to understand if there is an existing relationship between the amount of time we spend watching violent content, in this case narco-series, and the increase in violence in our society, we decided to focus on the youth. Every person from 12 to 19 years old will be our test subject as long as he or she lives in Mexico City. Our guest is that if undergoing depression teenagers are met with a lot of time in front of narcoseries, they'll become more susceptible to commit violent acts during daily lives. However, what can happen as well is that there will be no noticeable effect on our tested individuals.
For the methodology used, we used to focus on an easy, accessible way to get the information from our target audience. In this day and age, what better way than the internet to easily access the population and get the information we require to answer our questions? So, we developed an online form that, diffusing through text, helped us get the sweet knowledge that we wanted. To put our ideas into perspective, we had to get all the variables possible. So, we designed specific answers to make a profile out of each person who answered the form. 6 and 7, we used to get their perspective on the same issue that we were trying to analyze. And 8, 9, and 10 were questions to get insight on their emotional health, if they showed any signs of depression. 7, for example, was extremely linked to the behavioral ones, 2 and 3, in which case we could see if their behavior and narcoseries could have any connection with each other.
Now, thanks to the questions in the survey, we were able to create a classification within which our sample size would be categorized depending on their individual combination of answers. To make it simple, we'll explain it like this. Blue, green, and yellow aren't actually fans of narcoseries. Blue doesn't present any violent behaviors nor depression. Green does present violent behaviors but not depression. And yellow does act violently and suffers a kind of depression. After them, we have those who do like narcoseries. First of all, purple. They do not present any type of violent behavior. Then red, who has watched from 1 to 2 series, does present violent behaviors and depression. Dark red does the same as red but does not suffer any kind of depression. Pink has watched at least 3 series or more, presents violent behaviors and suffers depression. And finally, dark pink does the same as pink but does not suffer from depression. Moreover, we decided to create as well another classification for those who were affected by the consumption of narcoseries thanks to the aforementioned 7th question, which states, do you think narcoseries have any effect on your daily mood? This allowed to further in the research understand how many of those who are really affected are aware and unaware of this situation.
So we reached the end of our research, and a debriefing of our results is to be expected, of course. As stated at the beginning of the research, the hypothesis tried to prove the relationship between undergoing teenagers and the amount of time they spent watching narcoseries and their susceptibility to commit violent acts in their daily lives. However, in the end, the hypothesis was wrong. Out of a sample size of 206 people, 71 of them watch narcoseries, and out of those 71 that do watch them, 38% present depression signals. However, only 47.3% of them present a violent influence in their behavior due to the narcoseries. This can lead us to confirm the alternative hypothesis, which states that teenagers undergoing depression aren't really affected by an extensive amount of exposure to this type of content. However, we did notice that the percentage by which the original hypothesis was rejected is not low enough to discard a possibility of error in the methodology and acknowledge the completion of the objective. The research, however, did throw out some other relevant findings. For example, 70% of the people in the sample size do not present any kind of violent behavior at all, whether they watch narcoseries or not. 56% of the people that present any kind of violent behavior do not watch narcoseries, suggesting another possible cause to their actions. And 18 out of the 27 people that do present a violent influence in their behavior due to the consumption of narcoseries are unaware of it. All in all, if the research was to be done again, we would have to change the scope and the outreach of the surveyed people in hopes to find individuals with a different mindset than the one from where the survey was created, as it did limit the intent of the research. And last but not least, we identified that to have a trustworthy result, we need to take into account more than 2 variables. For example, the areas where violence takes place for the most part, and if the surroundings of the individuals have any effect on the perception of the content when they watch it.